things like not having access to your lotion. You know, the lotion that you put on your skin, the one that you prefer, the one that has been designed to accommodate your skin. Not having access to hair products. Not having access to where we come into spaces that are not ours. And then we want to tiptoe around the things that make us. But I really just want to plead as people of color navigating the world, stepping into unknown territory, going into spaces where we could have never imagined going into. Own your truth. Own who you are. We are the loudest. And therefore loud means you are disruptive.
People in Germany.
Does it make any difference to you that most of your, at your school, maybe there's more peach people?
No, because there's a lot of peach people in Germany and I don't mind that.
Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, my name is dambisaintlungu and welcome back to my subscribers. I see the numbers are increasing. Just encouraging those who haven't subscribed to do so. I love the nod and the encouragement to keep going. But to be honest, I've really been enjoying this platform. And I'm really always excited to see more comments from people and new faces. And a lot of emails, which has been great. So I did forget to put my email address in a couple of videos. I've gone back and done that so that we can keep connecting. So let's get straight to it. Today we're discussing, or rather I'm shedding light on a topic that I've been asked about. And I thought, okay, how am I going to discuss this? Because it's such a layered and nuanced topic. So as always, the disclaimer I'd like to give is that this is just my personal experience. This topic is obviously very nuanced and it really can't be talked about objectively. So just to bear that in mind while you're watching. So what I'm discussing today, as you can see from the title, is being a person of color or being black in Germany and the misconceptions maybe around that. But you know what, from my own lived experience, which is a little bit, not even a little bit, it's completely unbiased. I have a long-standing relationship with this country. Complicated one, great one, layered one, like anybody has with a place that they consider their home. So I obviously have access to cultural nuances. I have access to spaces. I have access to a lot of things through the language, and my relationship over the years with Germany has been strengthened in many ways through my visits that I've done at different seasons of my life, and also the people that I consider close, to me, and the relationships that I've nurtured over the years with people who happen to be based here in Germany. So over time, I've also understood how to navigate this space as a minority in this country. So to contextualize for people who are maybe watching this and have no idea, where Germany is located, it's kind of central in Europe. It's a very small country with a very big population. It has a very interesting, complex, at times a bit controversial history. And Germany is quite a big political figure in terms of all things modern politics and also in the past. So because of its past, I think there has been conscious efforts within the country, at least what I have had access to make sure to not make the mistakes of the past, through culture, through history, through text, language, the very clever ways in which I feel, completely as a foreigner, have felt that Germany has made interesting and clever and very impressive steps to sort of not make the same mistakes that they have in the past. So in that sense, I would regard that Germany is at least moving in the right direction to become a progressive country in that sense. And this has to be said when you're talking about all things race, all things how to deal with minorities. During the Angela Merkel era, the previous chancellor, I think Germany really stood out as a country in Europe who at least tried to encourage, immigration and made a lot of efforts in that regard to, in some ways, that can be critiqued, but that's not the topic of today, in some ways to be open to allowing, asylum seekers, migrants into the country. And maybe that needs its own, conversation. And recently there have been a lot of critique around how open and how accommodating Germany truly is to foreigners. So, that's a bit of context, very loose, maybe very badly done. I think a lot of people can do justice to the history of that. I actually will link a video I watched recently that touches a little bit on the German history. So for those who are maybe not as, clued up and would love to dive into the history of the country, I think it's worth a watch. So I think it's important to understand that. It's important to understand that Germany has in many ways made efforts to be very accommodating to minority groups, to be accommodating to foreigners. And so although Germany is predominantly a German country, which means the majority of the population happens to be natives, Germans, the language that is spoken the most in this country is German. It is definitely in many ways also quite international. There are pockets of that, especially if you're living in Berlin like myself. You find yourself in spaces that are very open and actually very populated with people who are not German. However, as you'd have it, our lived reality as people of color, as Black people, is that we unfortunately navigate the world really feeling, the color of our skin. Sometimes in some contexts more than others. And I think in as much as I'm a person who has access to many sort of layers of the culture here and in many ways feel very comfortable navigating the space, it has to be said, I feel 110% like I'm a Black person navigating a place that is not home when I'm here. So in as much as I feel that, maybe I can, engage with locals in a different way because I can speak German, make no mistake, I still know and feel it that I'm a person of color. So being a Black person in Germany means that you are conscious of that. How conscious you are of that and how positive or negative your experience is really, really depends on, have you traveled here before? Have you traveled at all? Is it something that even bothers you? Have you engaged with the topic intrinsically or deeply? And I feel like as a person of color, this is our lived reality. We go into spaces always having to be conscious of it. Sometimes it's because you're discriminated against. Sometimes you're not even aware that you're being discriminated against, but you always are aware that you have to show up and prove yourself. You have to show up and exist in the world just completely differently, right? So yes, you feel it in Germany. You do feel it. I know of people who've had some negative encounters. I personally have never. And I think it definitely has to do with the fact that I have access to the language. I have in some instances noticed that the moment I switch to German, so if I approach somebody and I speak in English, maybe, I'm not consciously, and I speak in English, I am received very differently than when I speak German. I've never had a blatantly disrespectful encounter, but I've had moments where I've felt like I try my best to sort of approach new settings sort of openly and objectively, and I never want to, come guns blazing like, yeah, I'm going to be treated differently because I'm a person of color. But the truth is often we are. Whether that's positive experience or negative experience, but often we just navigate the world very, 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 very differently. There was an encounter when I gave birth to my son earlier this year where when I arrived at the hospital, the nurse was extremely rude to me and then proceeded to speak to the father of my child really, really rudely as well. And I then responded in German and said, "Das geht gar nicht. You will not treat us this way." And immediately the scenario changed and the tone changed and she was very apologetic. So do I use the German language to gain some respect? Yes. Does it make me upset that that is the reality? Yes. At some situations, I honestly don't want to be speaking German because it's tiring. It's not my mother tongue. Having to make that switch is not an organic thing for me, even after 20 years plus of knowing the language. It's just still such a mental gymnastics or such a process for me to do it. And sometimes I truly forget. You just walk out the door and you forget, you get reminded by an encounter with someone that, I'm in a different place. So yes, I do use the language to gain respect. I do use the language to get access to certain information. And yes, it 1,000% makes me upset. I've had encounters though where I notice somebody being disrespectful or somebody, yeah, being disrespectful to someone else, and I then stepped in and intervened and spoke German to the other person to sort of to neutralize the situation. So yes, I also 110% use the language to also somehow, somewhat help others who find themselves in situations where maybe, I don't know. I don't know whether this is just me being myself, and those who know me will know what I mean, but I have this tendency to try and see the best in situations sometimes when it's not needed. So I don't know whether that's just me or my personality at play there, but I've noticed sometimes that people disagree or there's tension or there's conflict because of miscommunication. So one person means X, the other means this, but then because they're speaking two different languages and they navigate the world also culturally in a different way and socially in a different way, that they then clash, but both people are actually well-meaning. So there are those situations where I actually try and then sort of, I don't know, mediate. And I think the language and my upbringing and having access to intercultural spaces has allowed me to be able to almost very naturally have access to that and be able to know, oh, okay, no, we're having tension now because we're actually just misunderstanding each other. We mean well, but we're misunderstanding each other. Or, oh no, actually you're being disrespectful. So I think I know that, not even I think, I know that I have access to that. So there is that, and that has to be said. And this, to be honest, my experience as a Black person in Germany has always been, I'm here for short periods of time and I'm here completely knowing and understanding that I'm a foreigner in this place. So I also navigate the space very differently. However, I know that if you are a person of color and have grown up in Germany, that your experience is completely different, because then I can imagine you have to constantly navigate this complex back and forth of, oh no, I feel like I'm a German because I've grown up here, but I'm not seen and received as a German person because I look different. And maybe my situation at home is that I am completely surrounded by, a different culture. But then the moment I step out the door, I have access to this German world, and having to constantly navigate that can be really complex. And there is a term for it, and those who have this experience, please do jump in the comments or correct me. But there's obviously a term called Afrodeutsch, and I think that is people who either are mixed, so one parent happens to be German and another is a person of color, or those who have grown up in Germany themselves and are Black people or people of color, but consider themselves very much German. Sometimes, and I know this a lot from my own friends, it's people who yes, they happen to be mixed, but they also just have been exposed more to the German culture. So maybe they've just grown up in Germany and never gone to an African country, or another country of the other parent. So their reality is obviously very different, and perhaps I can even talk to somebody and bring them on the channel to shed light on that experience. But that is not something I can speak to. I don't have access to that lived reality and that complexity. I've experienced it a little bit, when we moved from Germany to South Africa, and I then had to reintegrate back into the South African society, and that was complicated because I was fluent in German. I had pockets of my childhood experiences that were not in South Africa, so I couldn't relate to some of my peers, and so I kind of felt lost. And that complexity has been something that I've had to navigate my entire life, and I wasn't even in Germany that long. So I can just imagine somebody who's grown up and spent a chunk of their life here, and they happen to be a person of color. So that's something that we just need to be real about. Now, as a foreigner, if you're here in Germany for a month, you're here for a year, you're here for a couple of months, please be prepared for the fact that this country, because you are the minority in this country, there are certain things that you just won't see. There are certain things that you just won't have access to. And those will serve as reminders that you are a person of color in a place that is not perhaps accommodating to people of color. And it seems petty to people who are not people of color, but simple things like not having access to your lotion. You know, the lotion that you put on your skin, the one that you prefer, the one that has been designed to accommodate your skin. Not having access to hair products. Not having access to somebody who can do your hair. Not having access to churches, maybe. Not having access to social and public spaces where you feel comfortable that remind you of home. That can be a very trippy experience where I just want to I just want to go to DM or, and get my lotion. And you get there and you realize that they don't have it. Not having access to the makeup in your shade, in your skin tone. Unfortunately, it's in the small little things like that where you realize, yeah, no, I'm not at home. And you know what? We travel maybe to have access to those experiences. I don't think we realize how intense it can be. And I know that it has affected me in the past, especially when I was here for my gap year. And that really affected me because I had experienced Germany in such a different way as a child. And then I came back and experienced it as an adult. And I just had different concerns and different needs. And it was always so trippy for me that I didn't have access to things like that. So be prepared that when you're coming here for short periods of time, actually it doesn't really matter when you're coming, or how long you're here for. Just be prepared to not have access to certain things because you are in a different country where you are 110% the minority and the space hasn't caught up to be as accommodating. I must say, I've lived in the south of Germany, Baden-Württemberg, a lot, and I consider that part of Germany very much home to me. That part of Germany is not as international as Berlin. So in Berlin, I have had access to my foundation. I have access to hairstylists, far more hairstylists. I have access to getting products, for me and my family's, skin or whatever. There's so much more of that here in Berlin, and I think it's because Berlin is far more international. I've also gone to Hamburg, and I was always pleasantly surprised how international that city is. So I think the more international space is, the more you're obviously going to find the things that you need to feel at home. Food products, restaurants that have and sell African food authentically, or just have access to African experiences or international experiences. You're going to find that more in cities that are a little bit more open. And you're going to find that less in cities that are just a little bit more conservative for obvious reasons. So be prepared for that. And you're also then going to have more experiences where you may be stared at. That happens a lot, where people look at you, well-meaning or not, people look at you a lot. Where people are maybe curious and may say things that are a bit problematic to you, not realizing that those things are problematic, or maybe realizing that those things are problematic and say it anyway. So the more international a certain city is, the less weird and cringy and uncomfortable experiences you're going to have. So I think that is something that is important to note if you're coming here or want to come to Germany as a person of color. And then I really just want to plead to people of color that, and I've seen this a lot and I don't get it, or maybe I don't want to get it, where we come into spaces that are not ours and then we want to tiptoe around the things that make us uncomfortable. I've seen this a lot, where you can visibly see somebody's uncomfortable, but they don't want to blatantly say that they're uncomfortable. Or they have an issue, but then they don't want to blatantly say, hey, I am feeling disrespected. There are times where I've had to pull myself towards myself when I've observed a situation and had to really say, okay, this is not about me. Maybe I'm projecting my own stuff onto a situation. Maybe somebody doesn't feel offended, right? But I really just want to plead as people of color navigating the world, stepping into unknown territory, going into spaces where we could have never imagined going into. Own your truth, own who you are confidently. It's often received really well, and if not, you correct people. I think it makes me really uncomfortable when I observe people trying to, maneuver their blackness in a way where they don't want to make others uncomfortable. I'd like to believe that we're moving towards an era where gone are the days where that has to be a reality, where people are moving around and traveling around a lot more and are understanding that people are different, and there's 110% nothing wrong with that, and we need to celebrate our differences. So yeah, I think navigating the world as a person of color comes with that. Sometimes you even experience what I'm saying in your own country, but I think more so when you step into different territories, and it can be a very complex and sometimes difficult experience. And we also just need to be real about things like structural racism, the subtleties in us being mistreated or being profiled purely because we look a certain way. And that is unfortunately even a reality here. I think, like I said, people who have a more intense lived experience in Germany could speak to it more intensely. I just feel like I would be disingenuous to speak to that when I personally haven't experienced it. I really haven't. And maybe it's naivety, maybe it's blocking it out, maybe it's me having access to certain spaces. But I've experienced this far more in my own country. And I think because I just have more of an intense lived reality there. But there is an undertone of structural racism. I've heard of stories, I read it all the time. And there was also a census that was actually shared. There's a few documentaries that Deutsche Welle has done on this topic, where people felt like they were profiled, where people felt like they were discriminated against, not even felt like they were discriminated against. This notion of big, strong, tall black men look scary. This feeling that, when we're scary, we're definitely the guilty party in a situation. We're the loudest, and therefore loud means you are disruptive. So, you know what? And there's various levels and layers to this. If we look at the German society, though, there's impressively a big percentage of people of color in this country, and also representatives in facets of society that happen to be people of color. I know, I've seen this, and I work very closely in that sector. You see it even represented in ministers. Aminata is a famous one, and she's a young person, but there's also many others who happen to be part of constituencies and happen to serve politically, serve the German society politically. And I think the more you have people like that in those spaces, the more, issues, concerns of people of color are then going to be prioritized. And I think, obviously, like any other white European Western country, there's a long way to go. But that gives me hope. That is something that I find incredibly inspiring, and I think it has been really impressive as well. So now I'm going to ask how Dinga's experience is. So Nana, you can just speak into the microphone and just share how it has been for you in Germany being a black person. How have you found the experience? Is it something that even matters to you? Whatever you want to share.
My experience in Germany has been really nice. I made a lot of friends, and I was happy that even though a lot of people said, "Why don't you just leave your child here?" Because like you're just staying there for a year. I still got to come, but because Germany is a really nice country with a lot of things and stuff. And
How do you feel though that there's so many peach people and not many brown people?
doesn't really matter to me because at least we have a home. At least we still have enough money to get things. Even though it would be nice if there was a little bit more brown people in Germany.
Does it make any difference to you that most of your, at your school, maybe there's more peach people?
No, because there's a lot of peach people in Germany, and I don't mind that.
Okay. Is there anything maybe that you miss about being in a place where there's a lot of brown people?
I don't really think it makes a difference.
Okay.
Because a lot of brown people in Africa equals a lot of peach people in Germany, of course.
Why, of course?
because everyone started in Africa, and then as we went, and as a lot of us went to more colder places, our skin became lighter, and then lighter and lighter.
Okay, Kenneth, thank you. Let me round off the video. So yeah, that's just mine and Dinga's experience of being here. I think you have to come here to experience it, but I think it has to always be said that, you know, as people of color, we navigate the world differently. That doesn't need to be minimized. That doesn't need to be, doesn't need to be minimized. It's our reality. The best way to know and understand it is to come. But obviously, I think, you know, what you can expect here is a pretty progressive space. You know, it's come a long way. There's a lot more to be done. I just want to encourage those who are people of color and happen to maybe have experienced things that are unpleasant to share them, to approach somebody who is a local to express it. I think our stories need to be shared. They're valuable. We don't need to tiptoe around that. But for the most part, Germany is a pleasant place to be in, depending on obviously the region. And I think it's an open enough society to have these uncomfortable conversations. So that's it from me.